Hi again then guys, and welcome to another installment of the News Roundup, once again in the motorcycle world, which as many of you know is a huge passion of mine, and this even more specifically is one of my favourite modern aspects of the motorcycle world, and that is electric bikes, especially electric sport bikes. And this is a new player on the scene. It's Canadian, it's called Damon. Interesting name for a company, but there you go. It's called the Hyper Sport, which is a little bit more spicy than the company's name, and it is a bike that is aimed not just to be yet another electric bike, but more specifically to be aimed more towards the millennial generation. Now, with that being said, it's not cheap. This is a £20,000 bike. At the same time, though, that's roughly, I think, about $27,000, maybe $28,000 or so US. So that still undercuts the obvious choice of the Lightning LS 218 by over $10,000, and that's for the base model. It's only about £3,000 more than the London-built Agility Saetta electric motorcycle. I'm not sure how that company's doing, I haven't heard from them in a while, but they were making some interesting looking bikes, to say the least, and compare that to something like the Mission RS, which never really got off the ground. It's a pretty well-placed bike on the market. $20,000 is, at the moment, pretty good for an electric superbike, and the caliber of this bike is actually very impressive. Now, the first 25 that they are producing, which you can already go to their site and pre-order now, are going to be limited editions. Special livery, uprated brakes from Brembo, I believe Öhlins suspension, various other small updates, kind of like a Aprilia RSV compared to an RSV factory, that kind of difference. So it adds to the kind of collector's appeal that those 25 will have. And then after that, you've got the mainstream versions. But don't let the term mainstream fool you, because this bike's magic number is 200. There are so many cases of the 200 number in this bike. It has 200 Newton meters of torque, which is just under 150 pound-feet, which is very high for a motorbike. 200 horsepower, or just under, I believe it's 197 to be exact, 200 miles per hour as well, which is a huge deal for an electric bike. I believe that's one of only two electric superbikes on the market that can exceed the double ton, this one and of course the Lightning, and 200 miles, interestingly, of range. And it actually does, according to their website once again, 201 miles to a battery at a 60-mile highway speed, and if you do 70 miles an hour, it drops to about 165 miles of range. And if you are one of my viewers on the channel who is more interested in the car side of things, 200 miles at best probably doesn't sound that impressive at all. For a car, that would be fairly pathetic. But here's the interesting thing, and I find this fascinating when it comes to electric technology. Currently, cars have this barrier that they don't seem to be able to really get past, and that is range. Because of the weight, of course, the aerodynamics, etc., most electric cars, even the best ones, rarely do more than 300, maybe 350 miles of range at best, and that's under ideal conditions, which is significantly worse than most petrol or diesel cars, which can sometimes do 600-700 miles to the tank. I've even experienced that myself in the 2019 Mercedes A-Class. However, in the motorcycle world, it's a big deal, because most bikes of this caliber, MV Agustas, Ducatis, Kawasaki Ninjas, you're getting nowhere near 200 miles to the tank. They're more like 130, 140 at best. So 200 miles for a bike is a huge deal. In other words, that would be, for instance, like if Rimac brought out a new car that could do 800 miles to the battery. That's the kind of comparison that we're talking about here. It's significantly better than any petrol bike of this caliber on the market. So it's got a pretty strong spec sheet, and when you start to look more and more into this bike, the price actually becomes more and more impressive. It also has a ton of interesting ergonomic and safety features, 360-degree danger detection, which gives you feedback to the rider in terms of cars that are behaving erratically around you. It has a 1080p HD rear view camera, and also a fully adjustable electronic riding position where you can switch between like a race mode where you're hunkered down to get all the speed out of it, and then the bike will adjust so you can sit a little bit higher, like a city mode, more of what you'd expect from a naked bike, for instance. Now, personally, I'm a fan of the design, especially the front end. It kind of reminds me actually of the newer shape Yamahas and Honda Fireblades with that very small kind of face with the wraparound lights. I do like the design. I believe that some electric bikes don't necessarily look that pretty. Energica for me, they don't really look that great. But the only thing that I don't like about this bike, and this may just be the photos, is the proportions. To me, it looks very small. it almost reminds me actually of a 125. And although for many people that probably won't bother them, even some of my favourite bikes are fairly small. The Bimota DB5 is a very small bike, of course the Ducati 748 is fairly small, but I think there are some vehicles that definitely look smaller than others, and it's the width of this one in particular that puts me off a little bit. It looks very narrow, strangely narrow, even with a rider who isn't particularly tall, I believe, sitting on the bike. It just doesn't look that big. Now, of course, that's not a deal breaker. If it's still a fantastic bike, then great. It's just the visuals don't quite do it for me in terms of the proportions. The design, though, I think is pretty cool. In terms of spec, which is what most electric bikes aim to deliver rather than style at the moment, Lightning included, well, it certainly delivers on that. So ultimately, I hope that they do well. I hope that they sell more and more bikes, because we need more stuff like this. Of course, you have the set in the old ways people who will never accept these kind of things, but I for one certainly love new tech, regardless of the reasons. I couldn't care less about emissions. I just love having a different way of achieving speed. And with a spec sheet like this one, that's exactly what the bike's going to do. So overall, that's it for this news roundup. Of course, stick around on the channel for more car and bike news from the road and racing world. And of course, until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.